just a minute. Can we cut these lights down here?
Yeah, just catch that one there. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect.
That's the you ever see. Bang. That tells the story very quickly why if you give the water is life, you can help make sure 4-year-olds become 5-year-olds. That is a powerful story. And I'm going to try real quick, if I can, to see if mine, here we go. Oop. That'll work. I'll email you this. George, it's yours.
Okay.
Sorry.
I don't have the PowerPoint, but I am going to ask Janice to go ahead and start passing around the document that we're using as a template for laying out the campaign. And Janice already stole a little bit of my thunder, but I'll flesh it out a little bit more. She referenced a puzzle and getting the outside flat pieces put together. I grew up in Chautauqua, New York. How many have heard of Chautauqua? A few people. Well, Chautauqua started out as a Methodist training ground for Sunday school teachers back in the 1800s, and it turned into a cultural, religious, recreational resort that it's in western New York, and in the wintertime it has a population of 300 because it has 400 inches of snow a year. And you actually have to shovel the roofs to make sure the homes don't cave in. And then in the summertime, the population jumps to 30,000. And it has a world-class symphony, a world-class opera house, a world-class playhouse. It has a theater that runs with current movies. It has a boys club, girls club, college club, women's club, men's club, all of those kinds of organizations. And they have a devotional speaker every morning that is a world-renowned theologian that is leading devotions in the morning. And then they would have politicals and or sociologists and or a number of speakers in the morning, and then in the afternoon you go to the Hall of Philosophy and they'd have different speakers there. And I heard everybody from Leonard Sweet to the guy from Crystal Cathedral. Why did I just go blank?
Robert Schuller.
Robert Schuller, and some of the best preachers from around the world were there. I got to meet and shake hands and talk to Robert Kennedy. I got to visit with Van Cliburn, who's a world-class pianist. I got to meet Kenny Rogers. This used to be a badge of courage, no longer, but Bill Cosby. And so it was a great place to grow up. Now, my family built a rooming house because in the early years, you didn't have a whole lot of places to live if you were coming up there for the training events. And so my family built a 4-story rooming house where they would have about 50 rooms that were rented out. And my job as a 7-year-old was to sweep the porches every morning. And so I would be out there and I'd be sweeping the porches. And then if it happened to be a rainy day where I couldn't go to the lake, or I couldn't go to the ball diamond, or I couldn't go to the kickball field, or any of those kinds of things, and it was a rainy day, we had this little area that the family lived in because the house was dedicated to our guests. And so the family on a rainy day, we couldn't go out and play, so my Aunt Margaret, who was a school teacher, would gather us around a little table over in the corner on a card table. And here I am, 7 years old, and she'd pull out a 50,000-piece puzzle. That's kind of big for a 7-year-old, don't you think? And I'd look at it, my eyes would get big, and she'd say, "George, don't get nervous. Just start by looking for the flat edges. Let's start with the flat edges, and let's start putting the flat edges together. Now let's divide the rest of the pieces into the appropriate colors. And let's just work our way a little piece at a time." What you have here is the puzzle, and we're in the process of putting the flat pieces together so then we can fill in all the internal pieces as time unfolds in the months that follow. Okay? So, what I want to do, and for some of you I apologize because I know this is about the, for somebody like Janice, this is about the 3rd time looking at this. And for some of you it's the 2nd time, and for that I apologize, but for the rest of you it's the 1st time, and you just need to know what the flat pieces are. So we're going to take a look at this, and I would encourage you to turn to page 3. And there's a section about campaign objectives, and then underneath that you see laying the cornerstone. One of the words there you will see is urgency. Why is this campaign urgent for this camp?
You're asking us?
Yes.
Well, we need more space,
You need space for why? Just have space?
more campers.
More campers for why?
Change more lives.
To change more lives. So remember, we can't just talk about space. You can't just talk about campers. We have to talk about changing the campers' lives. There's an urgency that more and more people have the opportunity to understand what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. And if you know the statistics about camps, approximately 60% of Christians come to a relationship with Jesus Christ at a camping experience. And of that 60%, approximately 50% of them is where our clergy come from when they hear their first sense of call into the credentialed ministry. So camping ministry has the opportunity to not only lead people to that relationship with Christ, but also to assure that we have spiritual leadership for the future. I'm in the West Ohio Conference, and we currently have about 60% of our clergy are over the age of 55, and about 5% of our clergy are under the age of 35. Do you see a problem? So we invest hundreds of thousands of dollars a year doing a candidacy summit, doing visits to colleges. We do an internship program where sophomores have a chance to spend the summer visiting seminaries, going on a mission trip, and following a pastor around and receiving a summer salary. And 75% of them go on to seminary. Now, I understand you stole one of them from us. We got them ready, and you stole them according to the 2 district superintendents we met with earlier this week. But that's okay, it's about the kingdom. So that's okay with us, because we're probably going to steal some from you eventually. But it's about the kingdom. We have to remember that. So in the West Ohio Conference, we have to address that issue. And camp can be one of the ways to address that issue, because people hear for the first time the call of Jesus, but also the call of what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. That is urgent. When you consider that the participation in church has dropped to what? Do you know what those percentages are? The last research I saw was about 28% on any given Sunday morning of Americans go to church. 28%. So, there's an urgency to lead people to Christ and to have that spiritual leadership. And so the camping ministry is an essential part of the church in assuring that that's going to take place. It's urgent that we create and understand how that space is going to provide that opportunity for them to come to camp so that they can hear that message. It's essential. Another cornerstone is credibility, in the sense that does this camp create the venues in which individuals can hear about Christ and can have the opportunity to hear that potential call and to have a changed life? That's a question. I'll let you know when it's rhetorical. Does this camp provide that opportunity? Yes.
Yes, not only for clergy, but for laity too. We never say how many laity in the church have attended church camps.
And as a result, when they go back to their local church, what do they like?
They've changed and work to become, when they mature, they become church workers and involved.
And they become more of a disciple of Jesus Christ, and they're serving no longer as a volunteer. Volunteers can say no. A servant of Christ has to say no to God. And one of the things we can do is change that language, but it transforms people to go back to their local church and find the way in which God has gifted them to be able to advance the kingdom within their local church. That's what you're doing by providing this opportunity. Somebody over here was going to respond.
I said more committed.
Yeah, they're more committed, sure. So it creates credibility for you in the sense that you're bringing about changed lives that's going to impact local churches. And in addition, if a life is changed and the church has more committed people, how's that going to impact the community? The community, surrounding community, not the church community, but the surrounding community.
More volunteers, more commitment to the community, more investment in the community.
Sure. They're more willing to do things to help out people within their community. They're better neighbors. They're more likely to have better relationships at home. You can go through the list of ways in which their lives are transformed. All from coming and staying at a retreat center where their personal life is transformed. It creates credibility. And of course, and for any number of our significant donors, they recognize as a result of all of those changes that can take place with transformed lives, they then have the opportunity to have an impact on their community. Yes, sir?
Another thing we provide that we don't recognize is the counselors who have an opportunity to practice their Christian leadership.
Sure. And as they practice their Christian leadership by being counselors, they're typically younger, college age, correct? What happens to them when they leave this camp as no longer being leaders in the camp?
Leaders in their own, they come back to
Become leaders in their local church, in their community, and potentially hear that voice that talks to them about maybe you should consider being in ministry. Okay, now the next page, essentials for a successful campaign, a favorable public image. Do you have a favorable public image?
Yes.
We don't need to discuss that one. We hear it. among all of you and your enthusiasm. We heard it from the district superintendents we met with. We heard it as we walked through this camp and heard all of the kinds of things that Trent, in the time that he's been here, has created that makes this an exciting place for kids to come to. So it's got a great public image. You've got a compelling case based on what we just talked about with the retreat center. Are there adequate sources of contributable dollars? The feasibility study that you had done earlier demonstrated that yes, there are. And so it's a matter of how do we then get the story to those individuals and get them to a point where they're inspired. Martin Luther said there needs to be 3 conversions. Conversion of the mind so you understand the gospel, a conversion of the heart so you accept the gospel, a conversion of the wallet so you live the gospel. So one of the things we have to do is not only tell the story so they understand it, but help inspire them so it moves to the heart. And once you get to the heart, then you can get to their wallet. But you have to get to the heart where they're inspired to want to be a part of a movement that's taking place at this camp. It's very important that the board and the staff is enthusiastic, and I've yet to hear anybody that's not, so I'm not worried about that one in the least bit. It helps as we put the campaign leadership team together that we're looking for people that have influence over those people that can support the campaign both. And when we talk about donors, there's a tendency to only think of individuals. We need to start thinking of churches as donors that are very unique, just like individuals. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. And down at the bottom is a demanding timetable. These campaigns take 12 to 18 months. I've seen them have to go 24 months. It's a demanding timetable. And so one of the things that each person in this room is going to have to think about is, how can I allocate some time to do my part in the area where I have agreed to serve, to give the time necessary to assure that the things that need to be done in my particular area get done on time so that the campaign can move forward. I've seen campaigns held up by any number of teams that have not completed their task. And we don't want that to happen. And part of our role is to hold you accountable when you agree to do certain things, to hold you accountable to that. So if you turn the page to page 6, you will see the types of gifts required for a $2.7 million campaign. Now, one of the things I want to explain is if we were at a church, the odds are that that lead gift would be higher. If we were at a college or a hospital, that lead gift, that first gift, instead of being $250,000, would probably be $500,000 for this type of a campaign. But in reality, in wide area campaigns, where people come here for a week, maybe they come for 2 weeks, maybe they've never been here, but they've been here for the some of the activities that you put on throughout the year, so they know about you and they hear positive things, but they've never participated. We have to recognize in a wide area campaign that the odds are you're going to build the success of this campaign in that middle tier. So just for the moment, if you would, in that top 10 gifts from $100,000 to $250,000, over on the left-hand side, would you please write an A? And then in the $10,000 to $50,000, over in the left side, would you write a B? And then in that third set, would you write a C off to the left? And that's going to be important in a few minutes. But in reality, we will aim for and we will cultivate individuals that have the capacity to give $100,000 or more. We will also be looking at finding those individuals in Tier B, and we will, it will be fairly easy to address the Tier C. And you will notice there's a large volume of numbers of those individuals. But in these types of campaigns that are wide area, where people aren't here all the time like they are in a church, or where they've had a true life-saving experience in a hospital, or they haven't been cultivated for gifts for the last 3 years. Why, have you noticed in churches how they get upset when they have somebody that gives them $1,000 a year, and then they see in the newspaper that they just gave $1 million to the local university or hospital? Have you noticed how upset the church gets? And yet, what do we do to encourage those individuals to prayerfully consider a gift at those kinds of levels in the local church? And so the result is we will have a lot of people that will come in at that lower level, and that's okay. We just need to recognize that it's going to take more of them, which means we will have a 2-track system, and we'll be talking about that in just a moment. So, I'm going to turn to page 9. And I'm going to put Janice on the spot for just a moment. And here you have an organizational chart with a couple, and you will notice throughout all these pages it says draft. And it says draft because we continue to be customizing the campaign based on what we're learning and what would work. And so there's some things that aren't on this particular page that we will be adding. And there's some things that may not be quite as important as others. And there's some things that we've modified according to you, but I'm going to ask Janice to give you the names of the people that, for you to write in the different categories that are listed on the org chart on page 9. Go ahead.
Sure. So we are intending to have co-chairs, a laity co-chair and a clergy co-chair. We're very grateful that Betty Trumbull has stepped up to the plate and accepted being our laity co-chair. We are still hoping to cultivate our clergy co-chair. So that is out in the open, and we'll let you know when that happens. As you can see, Trent and other staff members are doing staff, and we will need to cultivate a volunteer to be our administrative helper. So we don't have that kind of volunteer, and if you would see yourself or somebody you know as being somebody to provide some of those kind of administrative duties, let me know and we can put you to work on that. As I said earlier,
Administration is going to just,
Sure,
as we go through, administration is, Janice is functioning in the role of coordinating of all the different activities as we come in town and different events that are scheduled, et cetera, et cetera. She's coordinating that. But we need somebody that's willing, when there's an event where there's going to be 10 couples attending, we need someone that's willing to provide the background music. I don't know.
Don't know where it's going.
Kidding. But someone that assembles the packets that will be handed out at that event. Or if we're, Tom or myself are going to talk to an individual about enlisting them to serve in a particular role, that make sure that we have the packet of information that they require. So it's a lot of it has to do with copying and assembling packets for particular meetings that will take place, sending out letters, sending out notes, those kinds of things would be the major role of the administrator. Okay?
And those activities can happen remotely, you don't have to be here on
That's right.
camp to do so.
And for anybody, as you look at any of these positions, we anticipate the campaign leadership team will meet approximately quarterly. But everything else we can do, when we come in town, we will come to you and meet with you and help you with the work that you're doing, and most of the work can be done remotely, where it's email and telephone calls. That's correct, thank you.
Excuse me, how many hours a week do you think, if you ask someone to do that, that would be?
Some weeks 0, other weeks it could take them 7-8 hours.
So 0 to 8?
Yeah, if you average it probably over the course of the campaign, 4 to 5 hours.
so campaign strategists, you obviously met both Tom and George. They're both with Horizon Stewardship Company. And you've got their email there in the front. Under leadership gifts, do you want to hear who we are talking to, or just those who have accepted?
For now, let's just do accepted.
Okay.
We don't want to put anybody on the spot that hasn't said yes, you know.
Okay, special,
But leadership gifts is the person that's going to be in charge of making sure that the campaign, or the camp site team gives commensurate with their ability, and also that the campaign leadership team gives commensurate with their ability. And notice I'm saying commensurate with their ability. What we're really looking for is 100% participation by both of those entities.
and obviously Trent has spoken of that many times already, so that's not news to any of you, I think. Special gifts, that will be Nancy Phillips, who just walked out the door. Now, here, she'll be returning though. Nancy is a pastor who's recently retired and has been very active in different kinds of congregations. And special gifts, as I understand it, will be other types of groups not covered above, but that might include things like the United Methodist Men, United Methodist Women. We were talking about it maybe being VIM kinds of groups, even retired pastors, or just other things that don't fall under other categories.
How about mothers of staff counselors?
Sure.
I want you to know something. Yeah. Major gifts, we do have a chair for that, and that would be Brian Oswalt. And I don't know Brian personally, but his family is very active here. Brian is a member, you said, of Maplewood United Methodist Church?
And they are responsible, he's not responsible to go out and talk to everybody, but his role is to help those individuals that have agreed to go talk to someone to make sure they're prepared, have the resources they need, and and they're targeting the tier A and B. Remember, I had to put the A and B on there? They're targeting the A and B category potential of individuals.
Okay, next, foundations and corporations. Does that include family foundations? We were
Sure.
wondering about that, okay. We have co-chairs for that. Ron Carty, many of you might know as somebody who's been active on the site council and actually a former site council chair. And also Sheila Monkey, who lives in the area, and she's also been involved in philanthropies of various kinds, including Camp Connell.
And I think that one's pretty obvious, just researching, and where foundations, most foundations do not give to religious causes. But when you have a special camp for special needs children, or you bring in a large group of urban kids, there are foundations that will underwrite the cost of that and potentially provide the resources for the facilities to make sure that when those kids come out, they've got a comfortable space in which to stay.
And Trent, you had already mentioned one of the foundations that has become active recently. Do you want to give that person's name? You had mentioned somebody who's given regularly recently.
Durham Foundation.
So those kind of things too, that might be well known either in the Omaha area or just in the general vicinity there. Okay, awareness hospitality, we do not have a chair for that yet. We have at least one person who has agreed to serve on the committee rather than chairing, Lana Beeson, who is also on the site council. Lana is spelled L-E-N-A, L-E-N-A, and pronounced Lana. And Lana is on the site council.
This is the group that's responsible for the party atmosphere when you're going to talk to a group or individual. So they're taking care of, for example, if you have 3 couples going to somebody's home, this team is responsible for the food and refreshments and taking care of things in the kitchen so that the individuals that are hosting the event can focus on hospitality with their guests, not worrying about what's taking place in the kitchen. And that venue can be from somebody's home to a country club to a church. And they're responsible for setting that up, if there's decorations that are needed, and the appropriate kind of food that would be served at that kind of event.
George, I have a question.
Yes.
I've asked somebody to be that chair, and they are getting back to me this weekend on whether they say yes or not.
Okay.
One question they did have is, when does the bulk of their duties start? I showed them the timeline, the very colorful
Yeah.
timeline thing, and it said, like awareness activity looked like it was gonna be like about 14 months into the future. Is that like, do they do things now or do they do things later? And what do they do? I
But
mean, the party
it's-
atmosphere, but.
Yeah, it's gonna be more like 3 or 4 months out would be
Okay.
when that would take place, because that would be, when you start, getting into, there's always exceptions in a campaign. You know, if Kent identifies 4 people that he